let's get started. I'll just admit people as they come in. Welcome, one and all, to the Garden Photographic Society's monthly Zoom program. This is our final program of the season. We'll be starting back up again in September, I hope. Our next, just to point out before we get to the program, our next event for the garden is our club photo outing in August 4th at the Morton Arboretum. See our events page on gardenphoto.org for details on that event. Everyone is certainly welcome to join us if you want. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Brent Paull, who tonight will be talking to us. Thank you, Brent, for joining us. We really appreciate it. A lot of people have experience shooting in Yellowstone and those parts and are interested in doing more. Everyone is always interested in doing more. So Brent is gonna give us some tips, techniques, locations on shooting in Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Brent Paull. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you for having me. So I started in wildlife photography 38 years ago. I've been doing it full-time ever since then. I originally started shooting for magazines, and I've shot for most of the magazines in the country on a freelance basis at one time or another. It all means a lot of nothing to me. What means a lot to me is going and shooting all the time. And so I do photo safaris in the American West. My business name is American West Photo Safaris, Brent Paull Photography. But so we're going to talk about Yellowstone today. I know Yellowstone's in the news with the floods. I just got back from my 2 spring safaris about a week ago. So I beat the floods, which was nice. And the groups that I had in May and the groups that I had at the beginning of June, we managed to beat the floods. So I'm grateful for that. Don't be too downhearted by the flooding and the roads being washed out. It happens all the time. The fires in Yellowstone, everybody thought the park was destroyed, but the park came back better than ever. These roads will be rebuilt. The one between Mammoth and Gardner, which is the one that suffered the most damage, needed to be rebuilt anyway. So now they just have to rebuild it. So they needed to rebuild it before, but now they have to. So the park will be up and running again, I imagine, by 6 months, maybe 7 or 8 months. But don't worry too much about it. It'll be fine. Back in 1983, when I started shooting in the park, there was about 130 grizzlies in the park. There weren't any wolves. Now there's 1,100 grizzly bears in the park, and there's hundreds of wolves. And so numbers vary by number being born, number dying, that kind of thing. I know Montana and Wyoming still have hunting seasons on wolves, so those that wander outside the park are subject to being hunted. But they reproduce a lot of puppies every year, and the wolf population has really tremendously helped the entire park. And so I'll talk about that during the show. So I'm going to go ahead and get my show started here. I'm going to share the screen, and give me just 1 second to get the show itself started here. There we go. Hopefully everybody has a great gray owl on their screen that says Brent Paull Photography Presents, and that's the beginning of the show.
Brent has asked us, if you have a question, just please unmute yourself and just ask it during the presentation.
My website is AM West Photo. I'm only going to plug this once. There's plenty of places to sign up for my newsletter, which is how I get information about my photo safaris out to people. And it's how they can see everything that I'm doing. And so go to the website, AM West Photo. This is what it looks like right now. The 2 red circles at the bottom are where you can sign up for the newsletter.
But we're not seeing the slides that you're talking about. You've got it set up to, we're looking at the speaker's view.
Okay.
The actual show.
That's not, it says I'm screen sharing right now.
Have you got 2 screens?
Nope.
You need to press play for the.
Press play for what?
For the
For the
presentation.
presentation.
Well, are you seeing the screen that shows the moose?
No, it shows the
no.
gray owl, but we also see your slides on the left.
You
In
gotta
other
press
words,
play. Play the presentation.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to get out of this just for a second here. Here we go. Let's come back to the slideshow. We'll try this again from the beginning. There. How's that? See, I only have I don't have the speaker's notes on my screen.
We're seeing just parts of the screen with your future slides over to the left.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, there's a way that you just hit play, and on your main screen, it shows just the slide.
Click on the home button first.
I'm sorry.
Next to
Say that again.
File up top.
So let's try this. No,
No, that's
that.
online.
That's online.
No, all the way up top, there's something called home next to file.
Yes, home next to file. Okay, I'm at home next to file.
Yeah, that's not it. Try transitions.
Oh, let's just go to
Slideshow. There
slideshow.
you
See,
go.
I would have thought played from beginning is the only thing I've ever played before. How about now? Still nothing?
No.
Set up slideshow. Hide slide. How about hide slide?
Okay, let's try that.
Oh no, click that again. You hit that.
Yeah, that's not it.
Um,
That's funny because I've never had to do this before.
yeah, I don't use the Windows. I don't use PowerPoint much anymore, so I'm not sure where it is. Transitions, animations. Let's just browse those menus real quick. Or view. How about view? The view menu on the right. Keep going right.
Okay. Let's go to.
No, not that one.
Let's get rid of notes. Not slide sorter.
No.
How about that?
Oh, well, that worked. Can you see your slides and your notes and stuff?
Yeah. Now is it going to the next slide?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we're set. Sorry for that. Anyway, there's the home page on my website right now at amwestphoto.com. The two circles down at the bottom in red are where you can sign up for the newsletter. And if you're interested in ever going on a photo safari, or if you're interested in seeing what I'm shooting, you can do that. And if you notice, in between those two reds is a button there that says past newsletters. And so you can go on there and you can look at past newsletters I've done. I do them every 2 weeks. And I'm shooting a lot, so there's always upcoming stuff. So let's go ahead and let's get on with the show here. We're gonna go and do this by seasons because I start in January with winter safaris to Yellowstone. Every year I do 2 safaris. I usually do one in either January or February, and I do one in March. Wolves are the main attraction in Yellowstone right now. It used to be bears, now it's wolves. And so wolves are a big deal. Whenever in wildlife photography we have opportunities to shoot behavior and interaction, that's really what we're looking for in wildlife photography. So when I can get shots like this of a black wolf with these coyotes, that makes for interesting wildlife photography. Again, behavior and interaction are the 2 keys that I look for in my own photography. Just about everything I've shot in my safaris, and hey, wildlife photography has blood in it. There's no getting around the fact that not everything is Disney, not everything is animals loving each other. Sometimes the animals are tearing each other up, and that's just the way of the world in the parks. And as a wildlife photographer, I'm here to present both sides. This is an interesting picture because it's an antlerless bull elk. You can see that he's lost his antlers up here. And you can see the water line that runs right down his back right here. The primary way that elk escape wolves is by running into the river and getting in water that the wolves have to swim in and they can't attack him in. Now you can see they've attacked his hamstrings here. They've attacked him up on the shoulder here, but his throat is fine. He ended up dying that night anyway, probably from blood loss. It was 25 below zero this night. And the next day was when we had the coyotes mixing it up with the wolves, trying to get to the carcass. There were only 2 wolves, a black wolf and this gray female wolf. And if you look carefully, you can see that her belly here is hanging on the ground. So she's very, very pregnant. And she was unable to help the black wolf, the male wolf, fight the 8 coyotes off, which normally they would have done fairly easily. And eventually the coyotes took over the elk carcass that the wolves had actually killed. Throughout the park, there's wolves everywhere. So there's no one place that's better. In the wintertime, we shoot a lot of wolves in Lamar Valley in the northern part of the park because 3 different packs overlap in the park in the wintertime, because that's where the primary herd of elk is that has stayed for the winter, as well as the bison. And as years go by, more and more wolf packs are starting to kill bison. When they first came to the park, only 1 pack, the Molly's pack and the Thoroughfare pack, had ever killed a buffalo bison. But now 3 or 4 of the packs, including the 8 Mile pack, have killed bison. This is an elk encounter we had in February. Again, you can notice that the hamstrings are damaged here, where the wolves initially attacked the cow elk. Here's the wolf. Here's one of the wolves. The gray one on the hillside with the blood on its face was the other one. About half of the wolves, adult wolves in Yellowstone, have radio trackers so that the Park Service can monitor them, find out where they're at, what they're doing. They have overflights, not every winter day, but probably 2 or 3 times a week. Remarkable pictures, because the more time you spend in the park, the more remarkable opportunities you have to photograph this kind of thing. They killed this cow elk right off the road, and the Park Service actually came and had to drag it away because it was too close to the road and was causing traffic problems. But to see the hunting interaction between the animals, truly amazing kind of encounters that are available in Yellowstone National Park. And not just, of course, with the wolves. We're going to see all the animals that are there here in a second. Again, they run for the water. So generally speaking, when we run across carcasses in the park, the carcasses are closer to the rivers. So the elk maybe was running for the river, didn't quite make it to the river before it got drugged down by the wolves. And typically a scene like this is fairly common in the wintertime. They're more far-ranging in the other seasons of the year, but in the wintertime, the elk, the wolves are all kind of centered in the valleys, and so are the elk that they eat.
How far from them are you?
Well, those ones with the elk, I was about 30 yards shooting a 500 millimeter lens. We were standing next to the car. The vehicles had come to a stop because the wolf action was across the highway. They were chasing the elk back and forth across the highway in Lamar Valley, and so we had to stop like everybody else did, and we just got out and shot everything that we possibly could. This was a pronghorn kill made by these wolves. Most of the pronghorn leave the park in the wintertime, but this one had remained and got run down by the pack. I posted, I'm not on Facebook anymore, I'm on Instagram, just Brent Paull with 2 L's. And but back in the day when I was on Facebook, I posted a picture like this, and there was actually 6 black wolves, and I said that they had drugged down and killed a pronghorn. Immediately, people came on saying, "Oh, wolves can't catch pronghorn, so you must be wrong." And of course, the guy riding in the back got a shot of the wolf and the pronghorn, and so I immediately posted that in the replies. It's amazing how many people think they know a lot about the wildlife there, when really they don't know anything. This is a shot I just took about 2 months ago in the park, a black wolf. There's actually an elk in the trees behind him running back and forth. She had dropped a calf, and he was after the calf, but she never let him get anywhere close. So she did a good job of defending her calf, and later on we saw her leave. Only about 20% of wolf attacks are fatal to the animal that they're attacking. Another popular winter animal on the safaris that I lead are photographing the red foxes. And both Yellowstone and Tetons have really good populations of fox. Back before the wolves showed up, coyotes really limited the number of foxes because they considered foxes to be much more of a competitor. and the coyotes would kill the foxes. And so prior to the wolves coming in 95, I'd only seen one or two red fox between 83 and 90, probably 98, 99. But in the end of the 90s, the foxes really started to rebound to where now, when I go to the park any season, we usually photograph red foxes every single day. There's one in the snowstorm. He's been out mousing, so he's covered in ice. They use their ears and their sense of smell and hearing to find the voles under the snow. Typically, when you see a picture like this, it's easy to know how deep the snow is.
Oh, wow.
If you see no sagebrush, the sagebrush is about 30 inches tall, and the tops of the sagebrush stick up 5 or 6 more inches. So if you look across a field like this and you see no tops of the sagebrush, you know that the snow is at least 3 feet deep. And so the fox has 3 feet between him and the ground. And so you know how deep he has to go. The voles come up, they burrow up into the snow to eat the sagebrush. The fox hears them gnawing on the sagebrush underneath the snow. He triangulates with his ears, and then he does a massive jump. How high the fox goes will depend on how deep he has to go. And the deeper that he has to go in the snow to get the vole, the higher the jump and the deeper he'll go. And he just beats his face right into the snow. And then there he is with the mouse, just to show you that he had a successful leap and a jump there. He brought the mouse out with him.
You know, the mouse is under 3 feet of water.
Yeah, and so here's another mousing fox. Locations for foxes. Probably the best one in Yellowstone is around Pebble Creek and north of Pebble Creek, going toward Silvergate, which is in Soda Butte Valley. This particular picture is on Jackson Lake in Yellowstone, Coulter Bay, Lupin Meadows Trailhead, a number of places are June Loop, one-way road, all good places for foxes. And so we get opportunities there. This was shot with a 70-200. These foxes were easy to photograph. People were out on the lake ice fishing, and invariably they throw food to the foxes, even though it's illegal. So the foxes get used to the people get used to the foxes, and so they're pretty habituated to people. This is a fox that was living up in a rock crevice that's right behind him. He can actually walk into the rock right there, go about 15 feet and come out on the other side of this rocky outcropping. Kind of cool. Again, we have lots of opportunities to shoot the foxes, and a lot of people make the mistake of doing snow coaches in the wintertime, coming in through West Yellowstone or through Mammoth and taking a snow coach down into the center of the park. Some of them have tracks, some of them have just giant balloon tires. But the best way to kill your wildlife photography is to take a snow coach ride. You see about 1/10 of the wildlife that you do just by driving the northern roads in the park where I do my safaris. You can stop anywhere, you can shoot anywhere, you can get out of your vehicle if there's no other cars around. You can pull off, there's places to pull off. You're on a snow coach, the windows do not go down, the snow coach cannot stop in the road, and they can only stop in places that have been plowed for a pullout. So that might be a quarter mile or half a mile down the road, giving you very few opportunities to take pictures of the...
A snow coach, I think, is like a tank.
Yeah, they have tracks. Somebody's talking. I can hear somebody talking. But yeah, they're tracked vehicles, or they have wheels on them. Another fox in Tetons. Here's one walking away. Again, you know how deep the snow is by the fact that there's no sagebrush in the picture. So you know that there's 3, 4, 5 feet of snow. Typically about 15 feet of snow fall in the wintertime. And but you know, it melts and compacts down just like it does everywhere else. Another animal that we are after photographing in the wintertime are ermine, which are just basically white in the wintertime. They're short-tailed weasels. They're very voracious hunters. And so when you come upon an ermine, you got really good vision if you can spot them. A white weasel running on the white snow. They have a black tip tail, which helps a little bit, but very quick, very hard to spot. Easiest way to spot them is if they run across the road. hard to spot them pretty much any other time, especially because of the glare on the snow. We get opportunities, not every day, but usually on every safari, we'll get opportunities to photograph ermine. And sometimes they're very, very cool looking, like this little guy. And here he is with a vole in his mouth. And this weasel caught 6 voles over the space of about 30 minutes. And he just went and stored them, took them off, buried them, came back, hunted this little marshy area under the snow, popped out every few minutes with another vole, and just pillaged the voles that were there. Very good hunters. This is a pine marten. This is one of the rarer animals in the park, besides wolverines and lynx, which are only rarely seen. We did have a wolverine seen and photographed this winter. And I talked to the guy when I was there a couple of weeks ago on the spring safaris, talked to the guy that shot the pictures, and they went viral. I mean, millions of people looked at those pictures of the wolverine. We, however, did not find the wolverine in our 20 days in Yellowstone. I do 2 safaris, different days, so people can come basically for as long as they want. Pine martens are another rare subject that we're always looking for, always trying to photograph. Very difficult to find, very difficult to photograph. In 38 years, you're looking at my best pictures right now. So you don't get a lot of opportunities. Here in California, we've got them in Sequoia, we've got them in Yosemite, in all the national parks that are in the Sierra Mountains all have pine martens, as well as Pacific fishers. We have Pacific fishers here in Sequoia. I love shooting in the weather. I never stop safaris for the weather. I look forward to days when it's snowing. I look forward to days like this because it adds a texture and a unique wildness, I think, to the pictures that we take when we're out in the field shooting. We want to be out there. We want to be photographing them in all the weather seasons that they have to live in. Kind of like the predator-prey relationship. These animals in the weather, that's a relationship that they have to live through, and it's important to photograph that relationship with the bad weather and the cold. These are all in Yellowstone. Ever since the fires in '88, and I was in the park in '88. Obviously, I started shooting there in '83, but I was in the park during the fires in '88, and some of the best moose country, Willow Flats, Moose Flats, Swan Valley, all the willows out there all got burned. Most of the moose moved down to the Tetons, and it's only been about the last 7 or 8 years that we really had a moose population starting to come back into Yellowstone, and now the moose population is pretty good, almost back to normal, I would say. We do run across mountain lions on occasion. It's another animal that we can't count on, but we certainly take every opportunity to photograph them whenever we can. Here's one hiding up in some juniper trees. This is down in the Tetons. He had killed a mule deer and would only come out at night, unfortunately. And if you want to see a picture taken at ISO 51000, there you go. Grainy as it is, that was shot at ISO 51000 and it's completely dark, complete darkness. And the only way we could tell the cat was moving was we could see a dark shape on the white snow coming down in the darkness. He would come down and feed for about 15 or 20 minutes. Then he would go back up to the tree above him where he just left, and he'd stay there for 2 or 3 hours, and he'd come down and feed 3 or 4 times during the night, but he would never come out in complete open light during the daytime, which is unfortunate. In 38 years of shooting in the park, this bobcat was my first bobcat. I shot this about 3 months ago in Yellowstone. Like most of the cats that are photographed there, it's a yearling bobcat because no adult bobcat would come out in daylight in a park full of wolves and coyotes. He would be asking for death, but an adolescent bobcat doesn't know any better. And so most of the ones that people have photographed down on the Madison River, and this bobcat as well that I shot in Little America, they're juveniles. Adults just are almost completely nocturnal in Yellowstone and the Tetons because of the volume of other predators. I'm kind of known as a bobcat photographer here in California. I've shot thousands of bobcats, and do bobcat safaris in the wintertime when bobcats are easier to photograph during the day. But this, in 38 years, this is my first bobcat in Yellowstone. A lot of people ask me, well, how can you tell a male bobcat from a female bobcat? The head looks small because the body looks big. And that's how you tell a male from a female without the usual peeing or seeing sex organs or anything. The head on this cat looks a little bit smaller than the body, which is bigger. And this is a male tomcat. Again, the head looks a little bit small for the body. That's how you tell females. Females look like glorified house cats. Males actually have a big muscular body that's out of proportion with the size of their head. These are all targets of opportunity, which means when we see something like this in the park, any season, we are immediately stopping. We're bailing out of the vehicles and we're photographing the cats, whether they be mountain lions. There's lynx in the park, which I've photographed in Colorado. I've never photographed a lynx in Yellowstone. I've seen them in Glacier, where I go. I have a safari at the beginning of August for 5 days. And we have a better chance of seeing wolverines and lynx in Glacier than we do in Yellowstone. There's that same cat working up the mountainside. And there he is. That's the last I saw of him. The bird started harassing him. And yet 400 yards to the right, out of sight of this picture, is a wolf kill with a pack of 12 wolves feeding on the carcass. Just over these little, you can see he's on a little hill here, and he no doubt can see the wolves. And yet there's not a tree. There's not a tree within 200 or 300 yards of this cat. And the only way that he could get away from a wolf is to get to a tree quicker than that wolf could catch him. Cats are very quick. Wolves are very strong, can run for a long time. So that cat better get closer to the trees because that's his only method of survival. This was a pretty famous bull elk number 10. He was known for spearing cars in Mammoth Hot Springs, and they finally had to dart him one year, about 6 years ago, and cut his horns off with a hacksaw because he was just coming up to vehicles and punching holes in the sides of their doors. And he was a dominant, mean, aggressive bull elk. A lot of people think that if something happens between a person and an animal in the park, it's always the person's fault, and that's 95% untrue. 5% of the people provoke, but 95% of the time, it's you just found an animal that's pissed off, or you found an animal having a bad day, or you crossed the animal on just the wrong time. And that was the case with this guy in the cars. This was his last year. You can see his ribs starting to show here under his fur. And he died sometime during this winter of 2018. But he's a big guy. He's 7x7. 6x6 bulls are known as royal bulls. 7x7 are imperial bulls. 8x8 or bigger are called monarch bulls. And when I was shooting for magazines like Bugle and Field and Stream and others, that was an important function of your photography, was how big was the deer, because they only wanted to put the biggest, most awesome looking heads on magazine covers or in magazine articles. Here's a cow enduring a snowstorm. Always fun to photograph stuff like that. They're amazing that they can live through 20, 30, 40 below temperatures for weeks on end and survive it like it's nothing. Some of the older animals may die during the wintertime, but if they can make it through about the beginning of April, middle of April, when the green grass starts to come up, they'll survive another year. This Bighorn Ram, the park has a lot of sheep in it. This guy is actually falling off this cliff. If you've ever wondered if bighorn sheep fall off cliffs, they absolutely do. If you look at his feet here, this one is sideways. This one is sideways. And he just suddenly, head over tea kettle, he fell off this 25-foot cliff. There's a tree right here that he went behind as he fell, so I lost focus on him. But he, like a cat, he landed right on all 4 feet. And he stood there for a minute, and he shook it off, and there he is again. And he just stood there, and you can see the cliff up here above him. And he just shook it off and walked away. Unbelievable how well he survived that fall. But they do fall. They do slip and fall. When you see a ram like this, and you see that on his horns where it's called brooming, he's broomed the ends of his horns off. That's because it's a tight circle. If it's a wide circle, more like this one, you see he hasn't broomed this one. But this one is a tighter circle, and it cuts off his peripheral vision. And so what he'll do is he'll come up to rocks and he'll rub that against rocks so he doesn't lose his peripheral vision. And when you determine the size of a ram, now these are little half curl rams. I'll show you later in the fall section a full curl, or how you judge a full curl ram. There might be a picture here in a minute. Yeah, like this guy here. If you go from the end of this horn straight across to the end of this horn, and it cuts through any of the eyes of the animal, that's a full curl ram. If it's down here below the eyes, it's not a full curl ram. So the eyes, these are all important things if you ever want to get published in a hunting magazine, because they look for those kinds of things, because hunters look for those kinds of things. How to determine a 3/4 curl ram from a full curl ram. Otters are another subject that we get a lot of in Lamar Valley in the wintertime, Soda Butte Valley, some in Gardner River. These are two siblings that are trotting it back down to the river after taking a nap in some logs. We did shoot them this year. Otter's a little bit bigger right now. She keeps her kids through the second year before she cuts them loose. So these are like 1 year and probably 1 month old kids. Here's a mother otter, and she's got all 4 of her babies playing around with her, learning how to hunt. This is her. This is the mother over here. She's got a little thicker throat. These are a little skinnier otters, and so those are the kids. Winter is something that we want to photograph, and there's unique set of environmental parameters in order to get a shot like this, where the bison are covered in the snow. For one thing, it has to be cold, but not so cold that it can't snow. So 0 on up to about 8 degrees, 8 to 10 degrees is perfect. It has to be snowing in the morning, because once they get up and they start feeding, they generate heat and the snow melts off their bodies. And so this is all these shots that you see where they're covered like this are in the morning, anywhere from maybe 5 below to 10 above, following a snowstorm or snow falling. It has to be like this. If it's if it's too cold, then it doesn't stick. If it's too warm, it melts right away. If it's no snow falling, it doesn't build up. It's just frost. And so you have to have all 3 of those conditions for the bison to get coated. I would say that if you were to spend 8 days in Yellowstone, you're only in the wintertime, you're only going to have 1 day where all those parameters are met. So, I've been going there a long time, so I get a lot of opportunities, and a lot of times the buffalo look like this. Here it's snowing, but it's about 18 degrees. The buffalo are out moving around feeding, and you notice that the snow's not sticking very much. It sticks around their faces because they use their head like a snow dozer to move the snow side to side, but there's no snow sticking on their bodies. And so if all 3 conditions aren't met, then you don't get that caked kind of buffalo in the snow kind of look. And in the middle of the day, this is what they all look like. Even though it's really cold, probably 15 below, and it's frosty on his body, the snow's not falling, and it's just the wrong temperature for snow to stick to him. Now here it's snowing really hard. It's about 8 to 10 degrees, so the temperature's right, but he's up moving and feeding. And when they're up moving and feeding, they generate a lot of heat. And so the snow melts very, very quickly. I shot this at about noon, and the only time I would have been able to get him coated in snow was probably 7 in the morning. The sun doesn't even out at 7 in the morning, but it's getting light enough to shoot at higher ISOs. And so we're always out chasing. And again, if it's a nice day, like 20 degrees, the buffalo look like this. And they don't look like they're in any environmental winter hardly at all. They look healthy. Their fur looks healthy. They're feeding on the sagebrush and on grass they dig up. We do see a lot of birds in the wintertime. This is a spruce grouse. There's blue grouse, which nowadays are known as dusky grouse in the Rockies or sooty grouse in the Sierras. But this is a spruce grouse. We do get a lot of good birds. These are Barrow's golden eyes. We get common golden eyes. We get a number of common mergansers in the parks in the wintertime. You can tell that it's Barrow's golden eye by the swoop, almost like a Nike swoosh on his face. If it was just a round circle underneath his eye, that would be a common golden eye. So this is a Barrow's golden eye. These ones up here to the right, these are common golden eyes, just with a regular circle under their eyes, not the oblong circle like that. Here's another Barrow's golden eye here, Barrow's golden eye here, but they fly in the same groups. A lot of trumpeter swans in both parks. Trumpeter swans have to have open water in the wintertime to feed and to land. And so, sometimes we'll stake those places out and get opportunities when they come flying in. A lot of American dippers. This one actually caught a trout. Normally they eat little bugs like stonefly nymphs, but this one actually caught a little 4-inch trout and stood there for 5 minutes beating it on the ice trying to kill it before he finally gagged it down. Very cool. Cool behavior. Bald eagles, we get golden eagles in the summer as well as bald eagles, mostly bald eagles in the wintertime, though I have seen occasional golds like this golden eagle here. This is probably one of the best golden eagle pictures I've ever had. He had a mountain behind him. He was feeding on a bighorn sheep carcass. And so in order for him to take off, he had to fly towards me. They have to fly into the wind, and he couldn't fly up the hill taking off. And so he had to come towards me. So we got nice opportunities to photograph him leaving the carcass. Coyotes, the big dog from prior to the wolves. Coyotes were the big dog. This is actually a scan from a slide from 1990, long before there was digital photography. Fun. Sun's going down, twirled up with his tail on his face. I actually snowshoed out to him and fell down, and he opened his eyes. And when I snowshoed a little closer, he wouldn't open his eyes. So I pretended I fell down again. Oh, he opened his eyes again, and I got that shot. Coyotes are one of the 3 dogs. Wolves, coyotes, and foxes are all canines, and those are the 3 that are found in the park. The 3 cats are the mountain lions, the lynx, and the bobcats. Those are the 3 cats found in the park. Mousing, everybody does mousing, not just the foxes. The coyotes do mousing as well. And this is a classic coyote mousing leap. Again, just like the foxes, they triangulate with their ears, and you keep your finger. I'll be honest, I shoot in continuous mode. I don't shoot one frame ever. There's never a time I shoot one frame at a time in wildlife photography. I'm shooting 8, 10, 12 shots at a time. I don't care about having to edit out excess pictures, because you can't hit the trigger fast enough when something like this happens. By then you're jerking the camera, you're shooting blurry images. So you have to be shooting in sequences as a wildlife photographer to get action like this. That really adds value to the pictures. This almost looks like a black and white tinted image, but it's not, just a straight. Coyotes have a tendency to look gray and black in the fall. There's another one that looks gray and black on top. He's lost a little of his brown as his coat's gotten thicker. Another kind of tragic picture. This mule deer was driven into at the confluence, which is the confluence of Lamar River and Soda Butte Creek. She was driven into the river by a pack of 6 coyotes, and there was no getting away. She got in the water just like an elk would or a moose would. They'd get in the water, but eventually she's going to have to come out of that water. And we left at dark. She was still in the water. We were about 60 yards away, but the coyotes were right there in front of her. And there were a couple on the other side of the river. There were a couple on this side of the river. And that's pack behavior. That's hunting behavior. It's hard to see sometimes, but it's an amazing cog in the wheel of the coyote survival and of the mule deer survival or lack of survival in the park. You know.
Brent, you didn't choose to include the coyotes in that shot for some reason?
Well, I'm shooting a 500, so I was probably too close. The coyotes were back a little bit, and
okay.
Almost everything I shoot is a 500 millimeter lens. I got rid of my 500 f4, the big lens, you know, got rid of it. I shoot Nikon, and I bought the 500 PF lens, which is a lot smaller, lighter, easier to handhold and shoot, better VR. And but almost everything I shoot in these shows is with a 500 millimeter lens. It's kind of the standard wildlife lens. I know the PF. I had my 500 f4 for 22 years, and when I sold it, I got $3,500 for it, and I paid $3,400 for the new 500, which is 100 times easier to shoot. So Yellowstone in the spring, lots of water. Everything floods in the spring. This year, it had the unique floods that really damaged a lot of the park roads. But every single year, the rivers flood. They come up close to the roads every single year. Here, there are these three wolves from the Canyon Pack in Hayden Valley are feeding on an elk that was killed close to the river. It's running for the river, trying to save its life. And again, wolves are only successful about 20% of the time. But this is kind of unique because we have a gray wolf on the left here, and then a black wolf on the right. The only one that had a collar was the alpha female, the white wolf. The other two didn't have collars. This is a unique shot. I only know this is wolf 271M male because he died the next day. We shot him along Soda Butte Creek, and he was walking very strange. He was not moving away like he should have been, and he wandered into a little meadow near Soda Butte picnic site. And the afternoon of this day, and that's only about 200 yards from where I shot this picture, and he's got real noticeable sunglasses around his eyes, so he's really easily identifiable. Anyway, we shot him the next day in the meadow, curled up. I thought he was sleeping, only about 80 yards away, which is, you know, when you're 80 yards or closer to a wolf, you're pretty happy as a photographer. 2 or 3 weeks later, and because I'm a licensed guide in Yellowstone, I get all their public information. And I was reading a bulletin from the NPS, National Park Service, and it was talking about how this wolf, and they had a picture of him, so I knew exactly, and they mentioned where they found his body near a Soda Butte picnic site. He died the next day after I took this picture, and he died of old age. And he was actually the very first wolf to ever die of old age in Yellowstone from the original wolves that were brought in 95. Now he's a second or third generation from those original wolves, the 95 wolves. Those wolves were numbers, 6, 8, 4, 12. He's number 271M, so he's a couple generations down the line. He died at 8 years old, which is old for a wolf. 95% of the wolves in Yellowstone are killed by other wolves. That's how wolves die. People think, oh, they hit them with cars, or people come in the park and shoot them. That, of course, never happens. They do get shot outside the park, but inside the park, there's no hunting. There's a million wolf watchers everywhere. There's scopes everywhere. Nobody would ever get away with shooting a wolf inside the park unless they tried to sneak in. And then there's always patrols, in the park looking for poachers. But he's the first wolf to die of old age, just natural causes. That's an interesting story to me. Here's another wolf. This one has a collar eating on a newly killed elk carcass. Coyotes on a buffalo carcass in the spring. There's a lot of carcasses in the spring. The winter kills a lot of animals. One of the things we're looking for on spring safaris, one thing we shot this year, 2 weeks ago, was a coyote den similar to this. We weren't quite this close. This was about 40 feet with a 500, 50 feet. The one we shot this safari this year on the 2 safaris was about 65, 75 yards, but they had dug a den right in the side of a hill, so they were easy to photograph. The mother's on the right, on the left, she's nursing. The baby puppy on the right is licking the dad's jowls, and that causes the dad to regurgitate food to the kids. So he gags up mice and voles and meat he's eating, and that's how he feeds the kids. So both coyotes have a way of feeding their puppies, not just nursing, but also by regurgitating food. Interesting. Like all puppies, they fight and bite each other like crazy. Fun stuff. Here's one throwing a vole, catching a vole in the field in the spring. Now this is an interesting sequence of pictures. This is one reason why you shoot in sequences. So this coyote's coming towards us, and I pull over. I've got a car behind me. And my groups are always pretty small, anywhere from 5 to 7 people. We get out, we're shooting this coyote, beautiful, coming across this meadow, when suddenly out of nowhere comes this buck pronghorn chasing this coyote. And little did we know that about 150 yards away, a female pronghorn, a doe, had just given birth to a fawn. And this buck, whether out of personal defense or defending that doe with the fawn, came and chased this coyote away. And again, this kind of interaction amongst separate species is amazing stuff to photograph. It's one of the reasons why Yellowstone is such a popular location, because you can get stuff like this, whereas in a lot of places you can't. The coyote can turn very quick. A pronghorn can run very fast in a straight line. And the way of the pronghorn. Fun stuff. Another mousing coyote. We're out shooting in a rainstorm here. You can't see the rain in the picture. I think it had just let up for a second, but both us and the coyote were pretty wet. But great picture. Nice mousing jump. I want you to know that grizzly bears mouse as well. I know I've got pictures from a glacier show I do where I have a mousing grizzly bear doing the same thing. Paws up, doing a jump, trying to catch a vole. Red foxes in the spring are wonderful to photograph. I mean, life is easy for these foxes. There's voles, there's all kinds of squirrels. We get all kinds of opportunities to photograph them in the spring. Here's one mousing. Here's one sneaking up on a squirrel. And again, I'm shooting a 500, so we're not going to have a wide angle view here. Most of the time, wildlife, you want to be closer, you don't want to be farther. So typically, occasionally I'll carry my 2 cameras, my Pro Body D4S as well as my D850. But typically I've got the 500 on one of those cameras, and that's what I'm using. This is a black fox. About 4%, 3 or 4% of the foxes in Yellowstone and the Tetons are melanistic. And so this is a typical example of a silver fox, or a cross fox, as they're called. This was in Tetons. I got all of 2 seconds to photograph him. But in the beginning of May, I do a safari out to San Juan Island off the Washington coast, where they have about 50% of the foxes are melanistic. And I actually got a picture, and I've shot them over a couple of years now. Lots of black foxes, lots of red foxes. But I actually got a picture of a bald eagle taking a black kit fox right off the den. He took it and left with it, killed it, and took it back to his nest and his babies and ate it. And it's the most remarkable picture that I probably have ever taken. I couldn't believe it. I'm following the eagle along, and I'm telling the people on the safari, hey, this is how bald eagles hunt. They zoom. They get 3 feet off the ground. They go shooting across the prairie, and whatever runs in front of them, squirrels, rabbits, whatever. And danged if this thing didn't take, and I couldn't see the fox. It was down in a hole, I guess, a little bit. But that eagle got him and lifted him right off the ground. Took him up in the air and flew, turned around and came right back by me and gave me perfectly close pictures of him carrying that baby fox away, which was really a hard thing because we're on the island to shoot baby foxes and black foxes. So it was no fun seeing an eagle kill one of them, especially one of the black ones. I mean, there's a lot of red ones, but especially one of the black ones. Another melanistic red fox with a lot of black in him. Here's one digging out a ground squirrel. Much like badgers, if the dirt is of the right consistency, they can just dig them out. And there's the Uinta ground squirrel he caught. It took him about a half an hour to dig down 2 feet to dig him out, but he did. He dug down and got him out. It's interesting that this year we didn't see any baby pronghorn or any baby elk because it was so cold towards the end of May when they start dropping that the does and the cows, the females, can actually put off having their babies because of the cold. And so they actually just stopped. And by the time we left, we saw our first pronghorn, which we normally see around the 20th of May. We saw on the 5th of June, on the last day of the safaris. And so it was quite a thing, them being able to hold off giving birth until the weather gets a little bit nicer. These are brand new babies, brand new pronghorn babies. You can tell they're all just skin and bones from being born. They've developed an interesting relationship with people. A lot of the prey animals have developed a symbiotic relationship with people because by giving birth close to roads, it almost guarantees them protection from predators like wolves and bears. And so a lot of these animals, I'm shooting like this picture here. This is about 40 yards away. I mean, easy shot with a 500. The baby walking between his mother's legs. But they do this, and I've got moose and I've got deer as well as elk, all doing the same thing because it's safe for them. And here's one. We were actually shooting the buck, and he's walking in the grass, and suddenly the baby jumped up out of nowhere. I mean, we didn't even see the baby. Jumped up. I guess this isn't dad. I'm sure it's not dad. That would be too Disney-like to believe that. But dad looked at him. Dad identified what it was. They kind of looked at each other from about a foot away like that, and then dad continued to feed. And the baby laid back down. Amazing, amazing moment. Okay, this is the sign that you found a badger. When you see dirt being thrown up in the air and you don't see anything on the ground, you know that there's a badger digging out a squirrel right there. Because I've seen that many, many times in the parks, and we look for it in the parks. Nowadays, we shoot a lot of badgers, and so not every day, but like every other day, we'll shoot badgers. Here's that same badger getting rid of all the dirt on his coat. Here's a mother badger with a Uinta ground squirrel. You know, it's interesting that no matter where you go, there's a type of squirrel that all the animals eat. In Yellowstone and the Tetons, they're Uinta ground squirrels. In Glacier Park, they're Columbian ground squirrels. In California, they're California ground squirrels. But no matter where you go, there's always a particular kind of ground squirrel these animals love to eat because apparently they are delicious. Here's some kits. Their baby badgers are called kits, and the den is called a set. So like S-E-T-T, set is a den. So to phrase it properly, these are badger kits at a set.
Are they delicious too?
There were two on that one. Here's three with this mother here. Typically, the one we shot this spring, 2 weeks ago, the mother badger only had one kit. But we had heard from another photographer that a coyote had come along and killed another one of her babies. So she may have had two as well and lost one to a coyote. I mean, they're just little balls of fluff when they're little. They have no ability to defend themselves. Matter of fact, I should have put in the picture I shot 2 weeks ago. I've got a baby with his mouth open, playing with his mother, and he just has these little itty bitty 1/8 inch long teeth, whereas the mother has 2 inch long fangs. And so they really have no ability other than the hole. And a coyote, if the parent's not there to defend the hole, the set, could dig them out and kill them. Here's your typical male badger, big claws. You can't see his teeth, but he's got big teeth. A lot of black bears in the park. When I started shooting in '83, there were about 350 to 400 black bears. Today, there's about 1,500 black bears in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Bears were extremely mismanaged back in the 60s and 70s, back before they really understood much about bears. Frank Craighead did the original research in the 60s. He wrote a book called Track of the Grizzly that really talks about bears in the park. And so we see a lot of black bears. This is a sow black bear. Her cubs are above her in the tree about 40 feet. And a boar had walked up, and she climbed up the tree about 20 feet, and she's willing to fight to the death from that spot right there to make sure that boar doesn't come up that tree to get her cubs. They try to kill the cubs to put the female back into heat. And this year, a 2.5-year-old grizzly cub was killed by a boar. The mother had already pushed off the other cub, but this one cub just was staying close to her, 30, 40 yards away. And the boar showed up and was trying to mate the sow. And he saw this other 2.5-year-old grizzly cub, and he ran it down and killed it. So it happens in the parks. Here's 3 little black bear cubs. If the cubs are different color, like this spring we shot one black bear sow that had a brown cub and a black cub, it means she mated with 2 different colored boars. She mated with a brown boar, black bear, a cinnamon boar. She mated with a regular colored black bear. And so she had a cub of each color. And they do fall out of these trees. I've seen them fall 15, 20 feet. I've never done a real good job of holding on when they're playing, especially when they're playing. This is a boar cinnamon black bear. Can't stop, not shoot that, you know. Black bear going through lupins. Here's a boar chasing a sow that does not have cubs. So she's kicked her 2.5-year-old cubs loose, or 2-year-old cubs with a black bear. And he's chasing her, wanting her to stop running so he can mate her. She would not stop running. He tried to bite her, and she just basically outran him and got away. Baby elk feed a lot of animals in the park. Here's a boar, a cinnamon black bear boar that caught a baby elk. Nothing the cow elk can do about it. There's about 10 or 12,000 baby elk born every year in the park, and about 4,000 of them are eaten. So they are a tremendous source of protein for bears, wolves, coyotes. Unfortunately, they're at the bottom of the food chain, but that's just how it is. White-tailed deer have begun to move into the park a little bit. I've shot white-tailed fawns and white-tailed deer in the park. Only a few, mostly mule deer, but every now and then we run across some whitetails and we try and shoot them. They don't handle the winters quite as well as the mule deer do, but they're a little tougher than the mule deer, and so they've a little more compact, and so they have made some inroads west into the west, getting into Yellowstone. There's another little whitetail fawn I shot in Yellowstone. And there's a mule deer fawn. Not near as pretty as the whitetail fawns, I'll tell you that. You folks in the Midwest and back east are spoiled by these beautiful little whitetail fawns. And again, a lot of bighorn sheep in the spring here. They're moving back into their higher country. There's snow on the ground because it takes a few months for it to melt, all of it to melt. But we get a lot of sheep. Until I shot this picture, I never realized that ewes will babysit other ewes' lambs while they go down to water. And so the other 7 mothers of these lambs, or 6 mothers, have gone down to water, down the hill, over the road and down the hill to water in the river And this ewe stood up on the hillside with all of the babies, and not one baby moved away from her. And I had never seen that behavior before in bighorn sheep. I've seen it in bison doing that, but I've never seen it in bighorn. And we shot this for 20, 30 minutes until the mothers came back, and then they all ran to their own mothers. Quite amazing. Here they are playing again, running around, chasing each other, developing their muscles to run up in the rocks and play. Here's a mother. She gave birth probably the day before I took this picture, since he looks pretty clean and fluffy. They look pretty wet when they're first born. And no matter where you're at, normally bighorn sheep like cliffs, but when they're off the cliffs and they're feeding, they'll stand on anything that gets them above the grass so they can see any kind of predators approaching. Baby moose. Okay, most dangerous animal in the park are cow moose when they have babies. This little guy, he's about 25 yards from his mother, close to the river there. You got to be careful around cow moose. They're an animal that, generally speaking, we're going to keep at 70, 80 yards distance, even though the park rules are 25 yards on anything that's not a wolf or a bear, which is 100 yards. I'll never stand 25 yards from a cow moose with a calf. It'll always be back. We'll always be back 40, 50 yards to give us more time in case she starts to get upset. Notice the size. The one in the back, the calf is 2 or 3 times bigger than the calf in the front. She's molting her winter coat off. And this cow elk dropped her calf right next to the road. She licked it dry. Over the course of about 2 hours, it stood up, wobbled around, and then finally was able to follow her away. But that entire time, no predators were coming close to the road. And so it was a protection for her calf to use the road and the people on the road as a form of protection when she gave birth to this little baby. Here's another one. Here's another one. And it's not like I'm out looking for these. I was out photographing other stuff and just stumbled across these baby elk on the ground. Fun stuff. We have owls all over the park, both great horned owls and great gray owls. A lot of people get all enthused over the great gray owls. I've shot a couple of hundred of them, and so I'm not so enthused by it. But whenever I take clients into the parks, it's always a big deal to shoot baby great horned owls or baby great gray owls, or adult great grays for that matter. Here's a adult father great gray owl. They're slightly smaller than the mothers. A lot of osprey in the park. I can't tell you how many gazillions of osprey pictures I've shot. Here's a male and female at their nest fighting off an interloper who came down and dive bombed their nest at the top of this tree. Really amazing to see. I mean, behavior that you just couldn't hardly imagine photographing. Bringing in fish. We're lucky that in Tetons literally is the best osprey nest in the world. The road, it's an off road, so it's not on the highway, is elevated above the nest. The nest is down by the river on the top of a telephone pole, but the sticks are deep enough to where you can crop out the bottom of the picture, get rid of the box, and you're literally shooting down at a slight angle, only at about 90 feet, which is, with a bird with a 5-foot wingspan, that's just amazing stuff. And so we've had amazing opportunities to photograph these birds at this nest. Just literally the best osprey nest there is. Shoot a lot of great grays. This is a spring great gray. They're out hunting for their babies. They're not so particularly worried about people. This owl took off about 30 feet from where he's at right now. Behind him, he flew about 40 feet farther. Over that 70-foot flight, I got a motor-driven sequence of 48 pictures, and 46 of them were tack sharp. And so the camera did the perfect job, did its thing, and I just tacked along, followed it. That picture, by the way, is not cropped. It literally flew right by me. There was one time we were photographing a great gray hunting, and for some reason, it instead of hunting in the meadow where it had been hunting, and there was about 10 photographers there. It banked and it flew right by me. And of course, they make absolutely, I mean, right by me, 2 feet away. The wingtip was 2 feet from my shoulder. Totally quiet, never heard a sound, but you could feel the air pressure change in your ears as it flew by. You could hear the air pressure change in your ears. It was the most bizarre thing. But so we've had lots of opportunities over the years. We did photograph a great gray this spring, even though it rained every day and snowed every day on us. We still had opportunities to get them in the light. Here's another dipper like the one that caught the trout. This is a good example of why you shoot in sequence, because you can never see this picture and shoot it. You have to just shoot sequences of the water running over the bird, sequences of them hunting in the water, searching for grubs and insects to get a shot like this. And so I encourage anybody that's doing wildlife photography, you want to shoot 5 to 8 picture sequences. Motor drive speed is a big deal in wildlife photography, and there's no such thing as too high a speed. So, my D4S at least a dozen or higher, 10 to 12 frames per second. The Canon 7D Mark II, 10 frames. All the 1DXs are higher than that. A lot of the new mirrorless cameras are 10 or 20, 30 frames per second. And if you want to take pictures like this, you have to be shooting those high frame rates. And you just have to suffer a little bit as you delete the old pictures you don't like. Mountain bluebirds. This is in the Tetons. This is in Yellowstone at a nest. Females on the left, males on the right. And he's actually defending the nest from some swallows that were trying to take over the nest. A lot of yellow warblers, a lot of, you people back in the Midwest, you photographers back in the Midwest are blessed by having these myriad of warblers, in Ohio and around. There's like 40 of them or something, 47. In the West, we have about 13 warblers, and we're probably lucky to see 10 of those. Palm warblers and some of the others we hardly ever see. Yellow warblers is one of our common warblers. So we do get opportunities for them. Yellow rump warblers like this. We get opportunities in Yellowstone and the Tetons. Goldfinches are fairly common. Red-naped sapsuckers are fairly common. I love how they dam the trees like this for the sap. Very cool behavior of these birds when they cut these holes in the bark to create sap dams for them. This is a Williamson sapsucker. Looks remarkably like a yellow-bellied sapsucker, but it's a Williamson's. Another cavity nesting woodpecker that they get in Yellowstone. Dusky Grouse. I had to change all the names on my show to reflect the ornithological name changes. Used to be a blue grouse. Now it's a dusky grouse. So we do get a lot of these. We get a lot of spruce grouse as well. Another dusky. This is a ruffed grouse. You can tell by the crown on her head. It's a hen ruffed grouse, though we've shot males as well in the wintertime. Harlequin ducks are, I don't know if you get them in the Chicago area. They're kind of a northwest ocean-going duck that you see on the coastlines a lot. But they do get them in Yellowstone in the spring. And so shooting a drake harlequin is high on a lot of people's lists. And the place to photograph those is Lee Hardy Rapids on the Yellowstone River. And since most of my safaris come just before the major part of the snowmelt, kind of in the middle end of May and the very beginning of June, major part of snowmelt is usually after the 10th, like it was this year, it flooded everything out. Rocks like this are underwater once the snow melt gets high enough, and then the harlequins are gone. You know, there's no place for them to go, and they head back north. Female common merganser. I love this picture just because, again, it's a picture I couldn't see. The eye is underwater. The eye of the bird is underwater. And if you're not shooting those 5 to 10 to 12 shots at a time, you never get a picture like this, shooting one at a time. You can see I'm emphasizing that over and over and over again because it's such a big part of wildlife photography. Here's a male common merganser on some beautiful reflected water. Another dusky grouse is a female. And we even have raven nests. This is window photography. If you understand window photography, this is the window is actually the mother in the background framing the backlit calf bison. Very cool. Very cool colors. This is my favorite bison picture of all time. This is the baby walking through the mother's beard, which I'd seen, but I was always 1 second too late to get the picture. So I finally got it one year, a couple of years ago. So that's my favorite buffalo picture or bison picture. They're not buffalo, they're bison, of a calf. Calves are known as red dogs because of the color. So calf bison are commonly called red dogs. Baby bears are commonly called coy, C-O-Y, cubs of the year, meaning they're baby bears, commonly called coy. If anybody has any questions, feel free to interrupt me and ask.
Yeah, two things about the way you
Yes.
shoot. Do you ever shoot from the vehicle windows, and are most of your shots handheld or?
Yeah, good question. About 90% of the pictures in Yellowstone are tied up, and about half of those I'm hand holding. If there's a sense of time and I'm not going to have much time, I'm going to hand hold. If I feel like I have time, then I'm going to tripod up. But only about 10% are shot from the car. You know, it's funny when I do bobcat safaris here in California, we do 99% of our photography from the vehicle because the bobcats are used to the farm and ranch vehicles out in the hinterlands, you know. And so when a truck goes by, all they do is crouch in the grass and they don't move. So we shoot from the vehicles. But in Yellowstone, we tripod up because by tripoding up, it allows us to change positioning. And, you know, I have a son that's in the Marine Corps, and it's all about fire and maneuver in the Marine Corps. And in wildlife photography, it's shoot a few pictures, change your position, shoot a few pictures, try and improve your position, shoot a few pictures, try and improve your position. And so by getting out of the vehicle and maneuvering, you have a much better chance of getting into a position where you get ideal pictures, ideal backgrounds, better light, better action, all that kind of thing. This bison drowned right in front of me. He went underwater about 2 seconds after I took this picture, and he never came back up. He just went under and vanished. Somewhere downstream, he probably got bloated by gases and came up to the surface and probably fed grizzly bears for a week. But he was swimming across the Yellowstone River. The water was deep. He was struggling, trying to get across. And literally, he just went under and didn't come back up. And that was, he was only in about 6 feet of water too. He wasn't in super deep water or anything, but he must have got a lung full of water, and that was it. Again, weasels in the spring are brown like this. At least this is a short-tailed weasel. Again, the black tail is on the back though, but in the wintertime they're white, and they're called ermine. Here he is with a baby squirrel in his mouth. And the adult squirrels are as big as the weasel, and they are chasing the weasel, trying to drive him out of their colony. And he ran from them. He probably could have killed him in a one-on-one fight, but there was like 10 of them chasing him. And but he would go back and down the hold, and he'd pop up 40 feet away with a baby. He'd go cache it in the bushes, just like the one with the voles did in the winter. He'd run back, go down a different hole, come up another hole, and it was like pop goes the weasel as we're trying to find him and shoot him. And it was amazing. A lot of pika in the park, like this little pika, smallest member of the rabbit family. Another pika. This is a beaver. And you know, once the wolves started pruning down the elk population back in the late 90s, there became a lot more willows and a lot more aspen, a lot more softwoods for these beavers. So we've seen a resurgence in the beaver populations in the park. And I love how he's using his tail as a rudder to hold him stationary in the water by using his tail there. Here's a snowshoe hare that's half white, half brown. He's just changing colors back to his summer colors. And literally, this is a giant rabbit. I mean, literally, when it ran in the road, we thought it was some kind of dog. And as we got closer, we realized it was a snowshoe hare that was still half white. It ran into the trees. We followed it into the trees. And eventually, we laid down on our stomachs. And we kind of worked right up to about 6 feet away. And I shot this with a 70 to 200 from about 6 feet away. Grizzly is always high on the priority list. There's actually 4 cubs in this picture. Now, this is not 399 from the Tetons. This is the quad sow from 2010 in Yellowstone, because bears in both parks have been known to have 4 cubs, not just 399. Who's probably the most famous bear in the world right now. She just kicked her 4 cubs loose this spring in the Tetons. And I saw her briefly for about 3 seconds on a ridge, but we ended up shooting a different grizzly with 3 cubs. But this was the quad sow from 2010. Beautiful bear. There's her 4 cubs standing up. Over the course of 3 years, I had 8 photography encounters with her and her cubs. And you know, bears, like a lot of wildlife, are very habitual. They will go back in the spring and eat in the same meadows, dig up the same plants. The bobcats I shoot here in California, they like to hunt for ground squirrels in the same meadows, you know, the same time of day in the wintertime. And so when you see wild animals more than once in a place, realize that it's a place that you can find them at other times as well. And again, we had numerous encounters with these 4 bears. Now, this bear on the far right was killed by wolves right before they went into hibernation the first year. The runt of the litter, this one right here, died in hibernation. So he didn't make it out of hibernation. But these 2 here survived, which is typical. About half the cubs survive. Those 2 cubs survived all the way to adulthood. And look how long the ivories are on the claws on that bear. Here's one of the 2 survivors. Here's the runt that died. She's got claws that have got to be at least 4 or 5 inches long. Now, these are our 2 survivors. This is the 2nd year. They're 2-year-olds now, and I photographed them a number of times. This is the 3rd year I ran into them, and this is famously the dangerous grizzly tearing down the dangerous grizzly sign. And he literally did this right in front of us. I couldn't believe it. It's raining, and the cloud is, you can see the cloud is right on the ground. And all of a sudden, out of the mist, in the same meadows where we shot him over the years, out comes the mother with her 2 nearly full-grown grizzly cubs. They have this sign up at the edge of this pullout warning people that bears frequent this area, dangerous grizzlies. And as we're sitting there photographing her, this cub comes over, and it's a big cub. It's probably 250-pound cub. Comes over, stands on its back feet, and rips down the dangerous bear sign, and actually took it out in the field and chewed it up. Just the most, you know, you couldn't pay that bear enough money to do that in front of me while I was taking pictures.
I think the bear knew exactly what it was doing.
Yeah. The dangerous grizzly tearing down the dangerous grizzly sign. Funny. Beautiful, beautiful light, beautiful flowers in the spring. You get opportunities like this on occasion. But you hustle. Typically on the spring safaris where the sun is up at about 5:30 in the morning, we're out about 5:15 in the morning, and we're usually done by about 5 or 6 o'clock. I always feel like a 12-hour day, 13-hour day is about all most people can do day after day after day for 6 days or 7 days, or some of my safaris go 8 days. Again, there's no safer place on earth than between mom's legs right there in that picture. Now, if any of you heard about the cub that was killed by the boar in Yellowstone this spring, it was one of these two cubs as a 3-year-old was killed by the boar. This is when they were coy cubs of the year. This was 3 years ago, within 100 yards of where the 2.5-year-old was killed. Again, she's eating in the same meadows, living in the same place. And it's something that you learn about these animals. This is a pair of mating grizzlies. The boar is on the left, the sow is on the right. Obviously, they see us. You know, in wildlife photography, it's a fallacy that you sneak up on animals. It's a fallacy that you have to dress in camo and pretend you're something you're not. These animals are absolutely used to people. They're used to cars. They're used to noises. They're used to buses going by. The minute you camo up and you try to sneak up on a wild animal, they're gone. They're done with you, because then you become a predator. And so other than a one camo all-weather coat, I don't dress in camo. The animals know you're there. If you're just another dumb tourist, another dumb photographer that they've seen a million of, they ignore you. They go on with their natural behavior. But the minute you try and sneak up on these kind of animals, they know exactly what you're doing. They recognize it for what it is, and they leave. Now, these are two very famous grizzlies in Yellowstone anyway, probably the two most famous grizzlies in Yellowstone. This is Raspberry, the mother. This is Snow, her daughter, as a 2.5-year-old, 3-year-old. Very famous bears on the north. They run the north. Very common to shoot them there during the day. Beautiful bear. The bear on the left, obviously, with that coat of really light fur, easily identifiable. She's now had her first cubs, and the mother had a bear following her this spring when we saw her. There's Snow, beautiful bear, about 275 pounds, not quite mature. She would go 2 more years before a boar will mate with her. Fun stuff. And of course, the Park Service one year left their snowmobile out near the warm-up shack just outside of Mammoth Hot Springs. And our grizzly bear beat the hell out of it. Broke the window off, tore the seats up, bent the handlebars, and just basically had a good time trashing the snowmobile. I posted a picture of this on Facebook back when I was on Facebook. And the very next day, that Park Service had moved it out. So somebody had reported that picture, and they had moved the damaged snowmobile away from this area where the grizzlies were. Okay, so there had been reports. This was in 2016, that this sow had lost her cubs to a boar. And I actually, because I know a lot of guides, myself being a guide, and I have had 1,000 clients come with me. I had a lot of people emailing me one night saying, "Oh, did you hear that the quad sow?" This is the quad sow now in 2016, 6 years after she had her 4 cubs, and she lost her cubs. Well, you can see right here above her eye that she was in a fight, and she was in a tough fight with a boar. You can see there's a big patch of fur gone off her forehead right there, and but you can also see that here's cub number 1 and here's cub number 2. She didn't lose either cub in that fight. So she actually won that fight with the boar and protected her cubs. But it got out somehow that the kids had been killed, when of course they hadn't been killed by the boar. They also grew up, and I photographed them the next year, and this is not them, but I'll point them out when we get to them. Here's a 2.5-year-old that's been playing with a porcupine. He's got porcupine quills stuck in his face by his eye there, right here. And, even bears have to learn to leave porcupines alone. Here's a sow right at sunrise, Mount Washburn. They just reopened that road finally. This year it's been closed for 2.5 years as they rebuilt the road. All right, now we're into autumn. So all the grass is going to be brown now. Red foxes out hunting. Red foxes are mousing off the rock, and I love the shadow on the rock from the fox jumping into the light. This is on a windy day in Hayden Valley. Another mousing coyote. I'm not quite sure why I trimmed this one down that way. Another mousing coyote. An almost ready to mouse coyote. This was an early fall snowstorm, and we got a mousing coyote. Bull moose become a lot more fun to photograph in the fall. The racks are all polished. Animals that drop their racks, like moose and elk and deer, they all have antlers. Animals that don't drop their horns, like a bighorn sheep or a pronghorn, they have horns. So just different terminology for the same thing. This is actually the picture that's on the cover of my website right now. This is a monster big bull down in the Tetons. This year for the fall safari, because Yellowstone's closed with the flooding, we're going to move all the days down to the Tetons for this safari come the middle end of September. Another big bull. The cow with her twins. Big bull crossing the Grovant River. Probably the greatest place to photograph big bull moose in the fall is around the Grovant campground. Now, a lot of people don't know how to pronounce Grovant. It's Gros. It's French. Grosventre. So they say
How does a cow moose attack? Do they just butt you?
I'm sorry, say that again.
How does the cow moose attack? Do they butt you with their head?
No. About 25 feet. You get 25, 30 feet from a cow, you run the risk of getting killed. More people die in North America from getting stomped by moose than getting killed by grizzly bears. And again, in the fall is another great wolf time. Sometimes you just have to get lucky. This black wolf has an elk rib in his mouth, and here's a baby wolf right here, and here's another adult over here, and there's 5 more wolves stretched out to my left. But again, I'm shooting a 500, so you do what you can do. I'm not backing away. Wildlife photographers don't back away from anything. You just shoot what you can get. The quality of a telephoto lens far surpasses any zoom lens, and so the quality of your images are far better with a telephoto lens than they are with a zoom lens, irregardless of what the zoom lens maker says. I don't care if it's Nikon zoom. My telephoto Nikon will outshoot my Nikon zoom lenses 2 or 3 times better in quality. Here's an elk carrying away a leg of an elk to eat by himself. Now, this is a unique picture. I have to tell you, I've never seen a picture like this published by anybody. This is an alpha female wolf with her puppy in the fall. So the puppy is about 4 months old, maybe 5 months old, and following the pack. He's out running with the pack. There was another puppy that wasn't right here. I couldn't get them both. But that's a baby wolf along with his mother. The mother does not have a collar, which is extremely rare. This is the Canyon Pack, which generally runs Hayden Valley, though I shot this near the Twin Lakes, North and South Twin Lake. But it's a unique picture. Just, it's a mother and her young out together, and it's like unbelievable. Unbelievable.
What do you mean she didn't have a collar?
She didn't have a radio collar. Almost all the alpha females and males are collared. Matter of fact, the Park Service goes after those wolves particularly to collar them and put a radio collar on them. That way they can track the majority of the pack members. Typically, if you have a pack of 10 wolves, 10 adults, not counting babies, only 4 or 5 of those wolves are going to be collared. And always the alpha male and the alpha female, the leaders of the pack, they are always collared. So what they'll do is they'll go out in an airplane, and you see it all the time. I mean, I see their little Cessna all the time, Piper Cub or whatever it is. And they'll go along flying in the valley low, 200-300 feet up in the park where no one else can fly except them. And they will find the wolves based on the radio collars. And then the helicopter will come in with a guy that darts them. And then they'll dart them. Then they will put a collar on them. And then they, release them back, and they wake up after about 15 minutes. They weigh them. They inoculate them from diseases. And but only about half the adult wolves in Yellowstone have collars. Okay, here's my picture. So if you draw a line from the end of this slightly broomed horn all the way across to the other horn, you see that it goes through the eyes. And that means that that's a full curl ram. It doesn't have to go up any farther than the eyes to be a full curl ram. So a lot of times in a hunting unit, if you go to hunt in Colorado or Idaho, it'll be a full curl area only, or less than a full curl area only. And so hunters have to know that. And it's something that when I started submitting to magazines and shooting for magazines, you find out that kind of stuff right away. This is not a full curl ram, even though he has a massive big horn. This one over here is full curl, but this one is not. And so if you draw a line between them, that line is below the eyes, and that would not be considered a full curl ram. More otter pictures. And again, you're not going to get water splashing in the air if you're shooting one frame at a time, because you can't see it and hit the trigger quick enough to get it. So you have to shoot in sequences. I generally am shooting in either single point focus or D9, small pattern. I almost never go to D25 in any of my cameras. Single point focus can be tricky because a piece of grass, like this piece of grass here in the middle of this face, that could draw focus on a single point focus. Whereas if I'm using a pattern focus, a lot of times it'll skip over stuff like that. Here's a river otter underwater swimming by me. Luckily, I had a little bit of light and some nice green on the bottom. Black bears in the fall. This guy's in a rose bush, so he's eating rose hips. He's an older bear. You can tell his teeth are worn down here in the front, and this fang right here is chipped off a little bit. Here's another bear eating rose hips. Here's one swimming on a warm day in the fall, cooling down. Now this is down in the Tetons. Down in the Tetons, they have hawthorn trees. And so instead of a lot of rose hips to eat and a lot of snowberries, buffalo berries, huckleberries that they have up in Yellowstone, one of the prime berries they have in the Tetons are hawthorn berries, which are these blackberries hanging on these small shrubby-like trees. And so this blackberry is climbing up into these trees. Here's another one way up in the tree, eating the berries right out of the tree branches. And you'll notice that this is not a very big tree. And there were a number of times when they would bend the branches way down, balancing on the branch, pulling the branches closer to them with their claws to eat the berries. Mule deer bucks in the parks. These are mule deer, so these are 4x4 bucks. They don't count eye guards for mule deer. And white-tailed deer, they count all the points, so these would be 10 pointers. They were whitetails, but they're mule deer, so they're just 4x4s. You count the points on either side. You do not count the eye guards. This is the biggest deer I've ever photographed. This is an 8x6 mule deer buck, about 44 inches wide. This buck, if someone were to shoot this buck, he would be probably the 4th or 5th biggest deer in the world, mule deer wise. He would score in the high 200s. At Boone and Crockett. That's how big that deer is. 5x5. We do get some Rocky Mountain goats in Yellowstone. They don't consider them to be natural in the Tetons. So recently they carried out a hunt in the park to eliminate as many big Rocky Mountain goats as they could. They have found evidence in the fossil record in Yellowstone of goats. They have never found records in the fossil record in Tetons. So for some reason, the Park Service, even though the parks are right next to each other, they consider them feral in the Tetons, and so they try to shoot them. This is the biggest pronghorn buck I have ever photographed. I mean, they're not antelope. A lot of people make the mistake of calling them pronghorn antelope. They're just pronghorn. That's the name of them. They're not antelope. They're not related to the antelope family. They're just pronghorn. But he is a monster big buck, and he's got a big herd of does because no one's going to challenge a buck with a horn like that. Here's one in the wintertime. This is an eagle on a bighorn sheep carcass. One of the great locations in the Tetons, you know, the Elk Refuge is right there out of Jackson. Well, you can drive around the back side of the Elk Refuge if you just follow the main drag going east out of Jackson, the main boulevard, Broadway. Just follow Broadway right through the middle of Jackson, right past the city park with the antlers stacked up, and it'll dead end into the beginning of the National Elk Refuge, and you can drive that road. And there's a big group of bighorn sheep that live on that big mountain there that separates the main part of the Elk Refuge from the backside. And occasionally they get picked off by wolves, and the eagles get the remains. Here's another eagle coming into that carcass. Great gray owls, high on my list, high on everybody's list to photograph in Yellowstone. I photographed about 100 of them. This was a unique situation where this guy was hovering as he hunted for voles, and I had backlighting that I was afraid was going to silhouette my owl. So I actually shot this at I just, you know, when you have muscle memory from shooting a lot, you can do it without looking away. I boosted my exposure compensation to +1.5, and I got that picture. Beautiful rim lighting on all the feathers, and just, it was a fluky situation that I just happened to guess right on the exposure compensation, and it was just right on the money. This is a different, same owl, 2 dives later. And he just came straight down, you know, just straight down, like a helicopter coming down from a hover. Look how long its talons are. Just impressive, impressive bird. The Elk Rut is what I originally went to Yellowstone for, shooting for magazines. And of course, the bigger, the better. Active. This is elk in the rut. He's in the water. He throws mud all over himself. He pees and urinates all over himself. He does more on himself that I won't have to describe to you, all to make him smell really rank. And that rank smell is what makes cow elk go into estrus. So literally, by how bad he smells will cause those cows to go into estrus. This is a big dominant bull. He got about 10 feet closer, then we had to back away. This was at about 40 yards, 45 yards with the 500. It's on a frosty morning. It's about 10 degrees, 12 degrees. He's got frost on his back. The grass is all frosted. He's tearing up the ground because there's no cows around. So he's a little frustrated. He probably got driven off by a bigger bull, but he was rutting. And when you have a bull that's really in the rut, you really got to be careful because you can't get too close. It's really the only time bull elk ever show any aggression is during the rut. Look at the size of the horns on this guy. Just the antlers are just huge. He's just a regular 6x6. This little cheater down here on this bottom horn doesn't really count. Here's a big bull. He's got a nice harem of cows, and he'll defend that harem of cows, and they'll fight. And I've got pictures of them fighting. Now this, in elk photography parlance, is not only a 6x6, but this tine right here that goes straight up is called the royal tine. This tine right here is called the drag tine, meaning hopefully it drags on the ground, it's so long. If it develops a bow like this and it bows up more, then it's called a whale tail. And the bigger the tine, the drag tine, the bigger the whale tail, the taller the royal tine, the better the chances of you getting published in a magazine, especially a hunting magazine. This is in the morning. Again, we're out early. We're chasing. We stop for meals, just like a normal day, but we're out early. So we're out 5 or 6 hours before we start for breakfast. This is a 7x7 bull, big bull, dominant bull. Here's a couple of bulls fighting, sparring, and we're almost done with the show. I got about 5 minutes left, and I think we're done. Again, now here's a good example of the whale tail on that back tine where it's curled up. When it starts to develop that whale tail and you get a real dominant royal tine like this, sticking straight up, magazine photo editors really love that kind of thing for for hunting magazines. Another big bull, snowstorm. This is a real snowstorm. This is also in the fall, but about every 6 years, Yellowstone will get snow about the middle end of September. And I'm always there at the middle end of September for the rut. And normally the pictures are without snow because it's not that often we get this kind of snow. But it just adds to the flavor of the picture, being able to shoot a rutting bull. He's bugling. And if you've never heard a bugling bull elk in person, it's an amazing thing to hear. The grizzly bears are getting fat, like this one is sleeping on the log, this grizzly bear. Another one. And they're all fattening up, so the bears are extremely active as they put on weight for the wintertime. They're out looking for food, they're grazing grass, they're digging up roots. They're doing everything they can to this one's trying to wedge himself between these two trees. Again, in the same snowstorm, here's a big boar grizzly. Now here's that little snow bear. This is snow. This is when it was a cub of the year, but in the fall. So it's a little bit bigger than a cub of the year, but it's got the same blonde coat on it. And this was in the fall before its first hibernation. And very cool. Still has that beautiful blonde guard hair. And that's it. So again, if anybody is interested in signing up for the newsletter, you can go on my website, amwestphoto.com, and sign up for get the new. If you're ever interested in a wildlife safari, that's what I do. It's all I do is just wildlife safaris. So,
Any other questions?
yeah, if anybody has any questions, now's the time.
Why were they shooting that goat? They just didn't want to contaminate the area?
Yeah, they considered them feral because the goats hadn't been found in the, in the archival record, the bone record, the bone structures that they find. And so they considered them feral, moving down out of the Tetons and out of Idaho into the park. And so the park hired 12 hunters and gave them permission to hunt in the park. And of course, they have to hunt at super high elevations. A lot of people don't realize that Tetons is the only national park you can hunt in. And that was the plan when John D. Rockefeller, what he did is really smart guy, obviously billionaire. He wanted to protect the Tetons like Yellowstone in 1872 had been protected. But the ranchers, are ranchers. They're cliquish. There were no ranchers in Yellowstone when it became a national park. So what he did is he formed 3 different land companies with different names, and he bought up land. Each of these 3 land companies started buying up land, and nobody realized that he owned all 3 of the land companies. Well, then when he went to donate the land to form Grand Teton National Park, and I think this was in like 1917 or 19 or something like that, his one condition was that the locals who were avid hunters would not have all their hunting rights taken. So as I understand it, there's 1 or 2 days in the fall where they can take, there's permits given, 1 or 2 buffalo can be taken, a couple of moose can be taken, and a couple of bull elk can be taken. And that's it. So just those 1 or 2 days. And I've been there, and there's out in the field, we're out looking for badgers and foxes, and there's a guy in hunter orange with a rifle walking along. They have pretty strict rules about shooting directions, things like that. They have a lot of rangers out there. There's probably a ranger every 400 yards on the back roads in the back country of Tetons, and it's very well regulated. But they get 2 days to go out and hunt. So Tetons is unique in that. No other national parks allow hunting except Grand Teton.
Brent, I have a question for you. You've been doing this for a while, so you still got started as a young man.
I did.
What came first for you? The love of nature or photography?
Well, I always loved nature, and when I was in college at BYU back in 1983, my major was business, but my minor was English, and so I had English classes. I was going through the curriculum to get a minor, and one of the classes you could get extra credit if you wrote an article for a newspaper, even if you got turned down and you had a rejection letter, you got extra credit for trying. So I wrote this article about a trip I'd done to Yellowstone that year, just taking pictures, just 35. I had Olympus OM4, and it got published in the biggest newspaper in Utah, probably the equivalent of the Chicago Tribune there, Deseret News, and they published it as a cover story of the Sunday paper, which back then was thick. The Sunday paper was 4 inches thick, and they actually paid me for that. And not only was my name in it, but I got paid, and I was hooked. Literally, that was writing that article, getting that published. I was hooked, and so I still finished my finance degree, but from that point forward, I started freelancing to magazines, and then as years went by, and you start to learn how to do it right. You learn the magazine editors, and you learn how to make submissions. Back in the day of slides, everything was slides back then. I got published more and more and more until I was getting published many times every month and making money at it. I did that for about 12 years. And then I decided I was tired of being a poor bear photographer. So I became a wealthier wedding photographer. And I had a studio for about 8 or 9 years. I still continued doing wildlife. I still continued shooting for magazines. But I shot 800 weddings in between, and I was living in Logan, Utah, which is Utah State University. And so there's a lot of weddings going on. And, I met my wife, and, she lived here in California, and we made the decision for me to move my business to California. And so for the past 15 years, I've been in California just doing safaris, and, 38 years it's been photography, and I've seen it all. I've shot from helicopters, I've shot plane to plane for airlines, I've shot for the Park Service, the Forest Service, the BLM, which out here means Bureau of Land Management. That's a joke. Hope somebody laughed. I've shot for every state out here, and it's been fun. It's just been a kick. You learn where all the best places are. If any of you ever come out, whether you do a safari for me or not, if you ever come out to shoot the parks, you ever come out to shoot in California, and you're coming in a certain month, I can tell you where to go, what to look for, where to be, how to shoot it, and I can probably send you a Google Earth map with an X on it. Stand here, look here, and get you on whether it's peregrine falcons or bobcats or whatever. But having a guide like me helps. But if you come out here, hey, I've got no qualms about giving up places I shoot. They're everybody's places. They're not my places. The animals aren't mine. And I'll tell people where to go and look for their wildlife if they're into wildlife photography.
And when are you getting your Z9?
I've had 2 clients that were on this spring Yellowstone trip. And in just to let you know, in 14 shooting days, I shot 24,000 images. So it was we were after it pretty well. I'm not completely sold on it yet. They like their cameras, but they didn't understand their cameras quite enough for me to have confidence in what they were saying. Right. If that makes any sense.
Total sense.
Yeah. And until I have clients that come on photo safaris that outshoot me, then obviously I'm doing well enough. I get stuff published all the time still. And I've had a lot of professional photographers come with me. I could name names, and they don't outshoot me. They shoot as good as I shoot. There are plenty of photographers as good as I am, but they don't outshoot me with their brand new Sony A7s and all the other stuff that's out there. And until I see that, that's when I'll make the switch. When I feel like somewhere I'm a step down now from shooting the top of the line stuff. And for all the talk about, oh, this follows the bird's eye and this follows the animal's eye and this does this and this does that, any competent wildlife photographer can do the same thing. I can be shooting an animal and adjust the focusing grid without ever looking away from the screen. Adjust, that's all muscle memory is all that is. And so I'm not completely sold on those being amazing features because I can do that in the viewfinder.
Right. I shoot some pro sports, and one of my buddy photographers is a Nikon shooter, and he got an A9 and he loves it. I'm just throwing that out there.
Oh no, they loved it.
And this guy is, he's been a pro sports shooter for many years. Nikon shooter. And
I think the Z9, I think it'll shoot 30 frames a second at the top end. And see, that's in wildlife photography. You're catching every single nuance of the movement and motion of the animal, and that's amazing. And so, if anything gets me to the Z9, it's going to be the high frame rate that we can shoot. So well, all right, I will turn you back over to your group. I see we're shedding members quickly.
Brent, could I ask Brett a question real quick?
Oh, you bet.
Last question.
I heard your safari's moving down to the Tetons in September.
Yes, for the fall.
We're thinking, we're in the process of doing late September Tetons and Yellowstone. What are your feeling on?
You're not going to get into Yellowstone, so I wouldn't plan on Yellowstone
In September?
No, the roads aren't going to be. The roads are wiped out. It's going to be at least 6 to 8 months. I get updates 3 times a day from the Park Service because I'm a guide, and they're just saying, please don't plan anything in the park until next year.
Good.
So
That's
winter,
great.
my winter safaris will go forward because we do about half the safaris in the Tetons and about half the number of days. Like if I'm doing 8 days, I'm doing about half and half in the Tetons, half in Yellowstone. So what I'm going to do is, instead of this safari coming up in September being 7 days in both parks, I'm going to change it to 5 days, all in Tetons. But they're just not going to let you in. I mean, it's just and you're not going to get a hotel. So you're not going to get a hotel in West. You're not going to get a hotel in Gardner. Cook City is landlocked right now without a road. Till the Beartooth Highway gets unblocked from all the rock slides. You can't even get out over to Red Lodge going the other way. And so just plan on it next year. That's all I can tell you is plan on it.
Yeah, that's sort of what I thought, but I just, you don't know, you didn't get the information that you have. So I think we'll cancel this year and maybe postpone it to next year.
Yeah, and if they're really lucky and in 2 or 3 months they get a road open, it's only going to be from the south entrance outside up to like Old Faithful or up to Yellowstone Lake. And none of the wildlife photography is in those areas. I literally, in 38 years, I've shot Old Faithful 1 time. And I've gone to the Geyser Basins 1 time. And that was because my entire group wanted to go. And I told them when they signed up, I'm a hardcore wild. Don't make me go to the Geyser Basins, They did. They talked me into going. And that's 1 time in 38 years. And all the wildlife is in the north end of the park. And that's where all the roads were damaged.
Yeah, I was hoping to go see Lamar Valley because that's what they always say.
Yeah, no, there's no getting into Lamar Valley.
Well, thank you for the information.
You bet.
So we'll see club members and others who want to join us on August 4th at Morton Arboretum. The information is on our website, gardenphoto.org.
I'll see everybody later.
And thank you so much, Brent. We really appreciated your talk.
You bet.
And thanks for letting us record it. The recording will be on our YouTube channel coming up. Bye.